Sherlock, and you have 8 minutes. Thank
you
very much.
Cathaoirleach. I welcome this motion because it's a very timely opportunity for us to discuss the issue of fuel poverty and the looming energy crisis. I think the first call that we have to make as a houses of the Oireachtas that is representative of the people is that the recently announced lifting of the moratorium on energy disconnections, that is something that is going to have to be discussed again as a measure to ensure that people are not cut off from their utility supply, including electricity, should they find themselves in a position where they are unable to pay their bills over the coming winter period and beyond. So I would call on government to engage on that issue with the Commission on Utilities with a view to ensuring that the regulator in that space at least discusses the possibility of putting in place that moratorium again. A number of years ago, I visited a house in North Cork. I won't say where, but as I pulled up to the gate, there was a woman who was lifting a bag of blocks in through her front door. Mid-terrace house, she was lifting the bags of blocks in through her front door. Naturally, one would assist in those circumstances, and one did. We got to talking, and we were discussing the state of her house and the fact that she was piling wood into a fire to feed a back boiler to heat a house. No other means of heating the house, and spent her time clung to that fire. That situation still persists for that woman a number of years later. We haven't seen a tangible, great leap forward in terms of a retrofitting programme for people who either own their own houses of long standing, but who do not have the means to be able to reinvest in their own houses because there's a shortfall between what grants they get and the true cost of retrofitting. If that cost could be bridged, it would mean, whether you're living in a local authority house or in an owner-occupied house, it would assist people like that woman greatly. A low-cost loan in her set of circumstances, such as being proposed by the government, will not be sufficient for her to be able to bridge that gap. Savings would be meagre because she is wholly dependent on the Department of Social Protection for her means of income. There has to be a better way of ensuring that the thousands of people that are reflective of her situation can be given an opportunity to retrofit their houses in a way that provides proper heating, in a way that provides proper insulation, in a way that damp proofs the house so that you don't have the mould on the walls that we all have, as TDs have witnessed in houses that we have visited down through the years. It has to be a meaningful objective of government. And right now, the evidence would suggest that in the last 7 or 8 years in particular, we haven't had that great leap forward to deal with the coterie of people that I'm talking about that is represented by that person. And I think the Minister would acknowledge that. So if you can do something for that person, you then don't find yourself in a situation where we're arguing in this House through our pre-budget submissions for increased costs in payments, in transfers to people on the basis that they have to meet the costs of continuing to shove that wood into the fire to feed the back boiler. You take all of that out of the equation. But be that as it may, we are at a juncture where measures are going to have to be introduced in this budget to offset the cost of the increased price in carbon, so that fuel poverty measures have to be evidenced in the budget to allow that woman to at least offset the costs of the coal, the briquettes and the blocks that she's currently forced to burn to meet her needs. So that is something that has to be dealt with as a short-term measure. We would argue that the budget 2022, has to introduce a carbon tax credit as an offsetting measure to deal with those houses and those households that will find themselves in the fuel-impoverished category in the coming 12 months and beyond. Because if the increase in the price of the carbon tax is already priced in following last year's budget, the danger now is that people on low incomes will find themselves in real income terms having to find the cost of, having to hunt around to meet the costs of heating their homes. If you introduce a tax credit, a refundable tax credit for those people, that would at least be a meaningful measure that would offset the costs of the increased price in carbon and would give some level of comfort to those households. I would ask the Minister, please, to factor that into your considerations if the budget hasn't already been put to bed in terms of the interplay between line departments and the Department of Public Expenditure. But certainly, at this late hour, some measure that would give working families and fuel-impoverished households a carbon tax credit that would be refundable, that would offset the increase in the costs of energy and fuel. We would also advocate for, as a short-term measure, an increase in the fuel allowance, to provide 4 extra weeks. And this is something that has been advocated by representative organisations, particularly those who are representing, people who find themselves wholly reliant on the Department of Social Protection for a payment. If you extended or increased the fuel allowance by €5 per week to provide 4 extra weeks, that would be worth approximately €272 to recipients. And that certainly would help the woman that I'm talking about here. Michael D. Higgins, our president, used to talk about rural electrification. He used to say, and I'm paraphrasing, that it took the stoop out of the backs of the women in Ireland because they weren't bent down at a fire for all of their lives, stoking the fire to keep the house lit and to keep food on the table. But it seems to me that possibly for a goodly number of our citizens that things have not changed perhaps, and particularly for those people who are living in those fuel-impoverished houses that we're talking about. I'm not having a go at the Minister or the Government. I think this is something that should be non-partisan, it should be apolitical, it's something that we should all be tasked with. And there are various Oireachtas committees who've made recommendations in regards to those very issues, whose voices, which are representative of the people, have fallen on the deaf ears of the executive, I might add. I don't know if I'm out of time, Chair.
Yeah, Deputy,
thank you,
very
Chair.
much. Yeah,
well,
no, thank you.
So there are some simple measures like the carbon tax
Yes.
credit that you could bring into play that would help a lot of
Lovely.
people.
Thank you very much.